because we're really appreciative of people making time during often people's working days. So just wanted to make sure we had it as a resource available for others who couldn't make it along. I wanted to, and just to talk about questions. So I think you can put your questions into the chat. Nina's going to do some filtering for us as well with those questions. We'll try and get to as many as we can, and we'll try and focus on the ones that are probably not so project specific, but broader questions that others would definitely want to benefit from hearing the answers for. There's probably a few that we won't have answers for. There'll be things we simply hadn't thought about. And there's quite a few New Zealand On Air peeps on this call, I think, in various places in the motu in different rooms. So we'll go back as a team and have conversations as well about anything that comes up that we can't answer on the call today. But I did want to start by saying, to give a bit of a sort of a provenance of the Within My Reach kaupapa, we're really deeply excited about it because it's a sort of living, breathing initiative that talks to our new investment strategy that we, I think, launched at the beginning of this year. So for those of you who might be aware of this, but we'd talked a little bit about having shifted from what we were calling the New Zealand Media Fund strategy, where largely that strategy was born around a sort of full focus on production outcomes, so sort of looking really specifically and almost exclusively on content outcomes being made. And then over the past few years, as we've seen a lot of the changes happening in the sector, we've been watching what's been happening with audience behaviours in different communities. We've realised that there's huge value and importance in us looking at a more holistic funding strategy that talks about insights and research as being a kind of genesis or a starting point for us to understand our audiences and our creators, then trying to look at whether or not there are capability and skills development, content development opportunities required to address gaps or to be where people are in terms of their content creation pathways and careers. Then about the funding of the content, which is still the largest chunk of the putia. It's the largest thing that we do, but it's now sort of nestled within this structure. And then lastly, this idea of discovery of the content, the platforms that it can be found on. We're increasingly talking more and more about the role we have to play in supporting the marketing of that content, as well as funding the production and the creation of it. So this initiative is that living, breathing strategy kind of in action, and it started late last year. We launched two big pieces of research around where the youth audiences are. One was quantitative and looking at all the numbers and crunching where the audiences are in New Zealand, the youth audiences, so that 15 to 24 cohort. And then we also worked with TRA to do a qualitative kind of an ethnographic study looking much more sort of deeply into the motivators, behaviours, values of youth audiences. So from there, we took that research, then we went out and we did two things. We spoke to a kind of a tight-knit kind of smaller group of content creators who they were either in that demo and or making content for that demographic. And we asked them to tell us about their experiences of accessing our funding. So what were the barriers, what worked, what didn't work. And we also looked at what were we doing. And out of that, kind of two things rose to the fore, which was the kind of key outtakes from those creators in particular were things like the need for mentorship, skills development, capability, the opportunity to pitch in projects that they themselves would want to watch and that they would want to make and that were within their reach to make, but maybe hadn't always as easily fit within the types of funding policies and structures that we had in place. And also looking at critically where that content was going out on what platforms. And so you can see it writ large through all the research, through the RFP, through the strategy that we're talking social media first in a very clear and definitive way with this initiative. So the only other thing I probably would add is just that then the RFP, which I think, Thomas, you'll speak to now a little bit more in detail, was just a culmination of us pulling all that analysis together and then trying to be really specific about saying, well, what do we need to change? What kind of opportunities do we need to put forward for people? How do we create a good structure around this whole initiative for mentorship? You know, is there a role that we can play around can't think of a better term than matchmaking, but that idea of finding creators and seeing if there are executive producers or people that if they need that additional support, they've got generous and willing producers who can help support them, who might be a little bit further down that journey. And that we had to look at kind of some of our funding processes, and Thomas will talk a bit to this, but making it a two-stage process rather than just one big deadline with full proposals expected. 2 stages, 2-page pitch, an ability to be shortlisted and then have more back and forth with us to help tailor the final application before it goes in. And as I mentioned, just looking social media first as well, and what does that mean, and marketing having to play a role in that as well. So that's kind of a big brain dump, but I think, we were really keen to just start to get more into the detail and hear what others think and what parts of what we've put out already aren't clear or need a little bit more context given. So Thomas, I might hand across to you to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Amy. So you have the RFP, so I just thought I'd kind of draw on some key things that have come up in my conversations with people. So the RFP is intentionally open-ended. Like, we want young creators, and we trust young creators to know what youth want to see. And so we want you to kind of pitch in what you want to make, rather than trying to fit any kind of model or box of what you think we want. We obviously have a couple of marquee high level projects that we're indicating that we're looking to support, but underneath that and within that there's a lot of flexibility, and the 2-page process allows us to assess what we get up front, and then kind of make some decisions and change and flex our approach in the round turu to support a wider range of projects. And also the kaupapa of the initiative is within my reach. And so that's a really perfect and beautiful title, because it kind of encompasses all of the thinking around it. And when you're thinking about your projects, we want you to be thinking what is within your reach. We want you to be scaling your projects, your budget, the scope, to something that is within your within reach for you in terms of your career and your capability. And with our and on the online portal, we ask for your values, and that's so that we can assist us with potential connections with EPs. We'll be asking EPs who respond to our expression of interest for EPs to also kind of talk us through their values so that we can connect you with the right person. And then we also want you to talk a little bit about where you've come from, what you've done to date, and how this project that you're pitching is that next step in your pathway, either for you or your team. And can
I just add as well, Thomas, sorry to jump in, because the EP attachment as well, which is referenced in the RFP, but it might not be that every project, there'll be kind of some teams, I think, who might be coming in really fresh, probably with very little of any connection with New Zealand On Air, and they might really benefit from and want to be connected in with an EP. Others might already have a relationship. So it's just to acknowledge I think the whole ethos, isn't it, Thomas, of this entire thing is that it'll be tailored, I think, a lot to where the teams are at, what content they're wanting to make. And that's part of the importance of what we're trying to do, is it's not one size fits all. We're going to try and see where people are at. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we really support people with established relationships with EPs, understanding the graft and the length of time and the commitment that comes with those mentorships and those relationships with senior producers, to come in with them, so that and show that kind of track record of relationship. There's been a lot of questions about the algorithm. Obviously, we all have questions about the algorithm. We're still early in our learning about it, and this pilot initiative is another way in which we can gather insights about what does and doesn't work within a social media environment. We used Inky Pinky Ponky as a really great recent, literally in the last couple of months, example of a project that was a social, it was a cross-platform release across Whakaata Māori, YouTube, through Coconut and Fresh's channels, and also had some really amazing TikTok and Instagram reach. And so we're really early in terms of what cracks the algorithm, but that project in particular had some key win factors where it struck on a specificity chord for 2 key audiences who mobilized around it and then ensured that it and engaged with the content on social media, that then meant that it spread widely and took a foothold among young people, which was its main audience. So we want ideas that are bold, edgy, and have an identifiable hook. So why will your audience engage and prioritize this content in a competitive social media environment? And what need is it meeting for them in a crowded digital landscape? So with the algorithm, it's more thinking about psychographics rather than demographics. Amie, is there a cleaner way to kind of describe psychographics?
Well, you chose that term. You got gold. I don't know, sorry.
But it's really about if you think about your own algorithm on social media and the kind of way that it's looking at you and the things that it has taken on your tastes and your wants and the things that you engage with, that's really what you need to be thinking about with your own content and what that content is serving for an audience.
And so sorry, just one thing to add as well, Thomas, I think that came up a bit in the TRA research, is where music plays such a significant role, I think, as well as hooking into the algorithm, especially on platforms such as TikTok, which others know a lot better than I would. But I think it's when we're talking about algorithm cracking, there's sort of a lot of layers to how that can have meaning, and it could also be around how all the thumbnails are designed and how they're rolled out. So it's going to be quite distinct depending on the different platforms as well. So we certainly, as you said, Thomas, don't have an answer to this is what cracking the algorithm looks like. I think what we're hoping is that this big initiative and the scale of it gives us an opportunity to fund a whole variety of projects and start to actually learn more meaningfully, especially in a New Zealand context, what helps content travel and audiences to hook into it and want to share it, and can we pull out any threads from that can aid future kind of insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amie. And we want, so in our greatest ambition, we want young people to be surprised, inspired, and feel proud that this content was made here. If we have young people say, after watching the content that's produced through this initiative, I can't believe this was made here, but I'm proud it was, I think that's a win condition for us. And also with social media first content, it's inherently high volume. So, and historically with New Zealand, when we're looking at a traditional platform outcome, we're looking at a per minute for the main content. But with these pitches, we want you to be thinking more broadly. You'll have a main content outcome, but we also want to kind of get a sense of your thinking around how much content you might spread across social media, how long you might be posting, when you might be posting, and kind of put some thinking into your length of engagement. Again, with Inky Pinky Ponky as an example, they only had 2 months, but someone might pitch a series that is released over the course of a year that has engagement on a weekly basis. There's a lot of room with that. We just want you to kind of identify what that looks like specifically for your project.
And I think that's worth just pausing on, because I think this was one of the single biggest kind of almost like a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of how content has often been both funded and released on traditional platforms, that the emphasis is put on the core series often that will get commissioned, go into production, and then at the tail end a lot of the marketing and assets are created, and then there's usually a relatively short, compact time frame in which that marketing goes out, released around the show itself, and then kind of comes to an end. And as we know, especially with content that has got kind of deep connections into different communities or subcultures, sometimes it takes a while to discover it, and then it can kind of take off. So that one of the really exciting parts that we're excited about seeing is that we want to see projects where the creators are thinking about exactly like you were saying, Thomas, the kind of longer tail of what the release looks like, and factoring in all the types of content and assets that might be made that will go long after the release of maybe the main core piece of the series or the story or whatever that content is. So I think it's a shift from how we've looked at things in the past, and asking people to think about that at the very outset. Think about it in terms of their budgets, in terms of their schedules, in terms of their timeframes, and build that in. That's the kind of one of the biggest differences, I think.
And there's a key indication in the RFP that we want people to be allocating for marketing and allocating for their marketing materials. So we've said projects up to 50K. So when you're budgeting and doing your kind of initial idea of what your budget might look like, make sure that you put that marketing on top so that it's actually allocated for, because and we've provided a resource of the kind of things that you might allocate for, and not every project will be the same. In fact, many of you won't need that whole suite of potential marketing assets.
Yeah.
You might have more specific things tailored to your project.
And ideally, not everybody would just come in with one line item that says 50K in their budget for marketing, because it's not about that. It's actually about trying to say, what do you think you need? What assets do you think you need to create? That template that we've provided and linked to in the RFP is just an indicative one. It's to get people thinking. You might find there's ways you would want to be allocating some marketing spend on things that are kind of grassroots community engagement. That's great. So the more specificity people put into their ideas and the applications, the better, because we're conscious, we always say this when we talk about marketing, we're conscious that when Putia is going towards marketing, that's coming out of a content production pot. So it has to be really well thought through, well articulated, I think, to justify doing it. But we're really clear that if we don't do it, oftentimes we're making beautiful content that doesn't get found and discovered. So it feels really important to do it, but we want people to be thinking really intentionally about what they're asking for.
Yeah. And also with our focus on mentorship and capability with this initiative, we're really open to ideas that have a content outcome but also have inbuilt strategies and opportunities for capability building and talent development, whether that's supporting youth creators or young people to make stuff. We're also open to pitches that reflect that, because effectively with this RFP, we want to start on the pathway to creating a better ecosystem and a better pathway for people along from that new and merging up to mid-career and into kind of established careers. So we're wanting to help build that ecosystem with some of the work that we start here with this RFP. Amie.
Great. So I think that was our that was the sort of preamble, some of the things that had come to us as sort of saying these weren't wholly clear from the documents that had gone out. There were a lot of other questions more specific, I think, to people's projects. So I think what we were keen to do now is throw it out to questions from the rōpū and just see what some of the kind of key areas were that people wanted to ask. And before we do that, I think Nina's been curating a few that will come across that says, how is the matchmaking process decided in terms of how people will work with producers and EPs and COI, so conflicts of interest? That's a good old acronym in our realm. And I think it's a great question. So I think what we have, as funding agencies, similar to the other ones in this space, we have processes around conflicts of interest where staff, anyone working on the assessment or processes our side, will be declaring any conflicts of interest they have around people that they might have kind of close involvement with. So we have good processes in place that unearth those up front. So no one who's got a conflict of interest on a project that might be submitted, they might have a relationship with that team, or they might have worked with them in the past or have had issues with them in the past. That will make sure that there's no one assessing those projects. In terms of attaching EPs, it's a new area for us. So again, I think we're going to be learning this as we go a little bit. What we've been doing some work in the background on is working with SPADA and saying, can we find some experienced producers out there who might be really willing and keen and able to support some of these practitioners coming through who will need support. And so we're building up a list of those producers on that side. And then I think it'll be a process of wanting to kind of, we don't want to orchestrate heavily how that process works, but we did kind of want to be able to do the matchmaking or suggest names that a team might want to approach. You kind of want the alchemy to be organic, about people meeting and having a coffee and being like, you're in line with our thinking and we'd really like to work with you or not. So I think there'll be I think there'll be a bit of an organic process about how that might work. And certainly once we get through the shortlisting process and we know which teams require teeing up, there'll be more detail provided at that stage around how that process will work, because we clearly won't be doing any of that if the projects and teams don't progress to the next stage. We'll only be doing it once they go on to the next stage. I think, Thomas, there was a question here around durations that you have in mind, and I do think, Thomas, you've addressed that well, which is to say it's not one size fits all. It's going to be completely dependent on the story you want to tell. Is it a scripted story? Is it a factual or non-fiction story? What platforms it's going out on? Would there be anything else you'd add to that, Thomas, in terms of, someone asking about a certain number of episodes, etc.?
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, exactly. It's kind of very open-ended. But if you're wondering how that kind of rolls forward into a budget, something that I do is I look through past funding decisions, and I do my own, I look what has been funded in the past. And obviously this is a social media first initiative, but there is a content outcome. So if you look back at what has been funded in the past and get your own kind of maths going about comparable projects, then that might help you with kind of doing your overall figure.
Yeah, great. There's also a question that, again, might be more of a one for you, Thomas, which was around where can we find the info regarding the producer support roles? For example, is it mentoring only, or the opportunity to attach themselves to shortlisted projects? Essentially jumping the queue. I'm not quite sure what that last point means, but just in terms of more information, is that to come, or have we already got some of that detailed in the form?
I think we've already got that detailed in the form. So there's an expression of interest at the moment for producers who have an established track record to put their name forward as people interested in EPing projects that come through the initiative. But then there is also, we do encourage people who have those established relationships with EPs to reach out to them and see if they're willing to support you into this initiative. It's a great opportunity for those mentorship relationships to come into play. And so I think you're very welcome to attach producers as early as you want. But for the teams that don't already have those established connections, we will support them to make them.
Someone's asked, can you please talk a little bit about the 2 significant scripted projects and how these will be considered and assessed in round toru? I'll have a crack at this one, and Thomas, fill in if you think some of the context is missing. So we were aware from the conversations we'd had with the youth content creators directly ourselves, that one of the barriers has often been that youth content gets pigeonholed as being kind of low quality, lower budget, and the opportunities to actually flex and create larger scale scripted projects directly for this 15 to 24 audience is sometimes kind of challenging or hard to do, especially if you are a creator who kind of sits within that age band yourself. And so we didn't want to be prescriptive across the RFP about these are the types of series we want to see and what we want, because we really, as you noted, Thomas, we didn't want to we wanted to see what would come from people who will make the content that they want to watch themselves. And so that's why it's quite open, but wanted to then still say, but it would be wonderful to see a couple of larger scale scripted projects come through if there are great stories to be told. So it's not a guarantee that they'll get funded, but sometimes it does feel, if you don't raise the flag up to say we'd be interested to see them, people just assume that in that youth media space they're not going to be open to being able to bring in larger scale projects. So beyond just saying we would love to see some higher concept scripted ideas come through, we didn't want to be too prescriptive beyond that. And we do want to acknowledge that it's not necessarily like there'll be a lot of those projects just sitting in people's drawers that had been kind of developed already or self-funded in their development. So if the concept's really strong and it comes through and it gets shortlisted, we'd be really open to talking to the applicants about whether some development funding needs to be built into the final application that is submitted for that project, to acknowledge that we really want to make sure that those types of projects aren't rushed through into production, that they have a really good time period to develop and, do the writers' tables, etc. Was there anything else you'd add to that, Thomas, around those scripted projects?
No, just also that though that with our qualitative research, the youth did kind of indicate certain areas that they were interested in seeing, and so it's thinking of content that talks to youth, not down to them. I think is kind of a key thing that we haven't had content like that produced here, so it's an opportunity to pitch in that kind of content at a decent budget level as well, which is exciting.
And actually, it's probably on that note worth talking about the marquee music project as well, because I've already referenced this, but one of the other exciting parts about this whole initiative is just how mashed together and aligned music and screen is, which we don't always see, or kind of within NZ On Air, the way we often are looking at our funding, it's kind of screen content funding and music funding separate, but we could feel from all the audience research that we'd done just how interconnected music is to the content that lands and has resonance. And so again, without wanting to be prescriptive about what can it look like, we just wanted to put the flag up and say we'd love to get some concept coming into us that might, I don't know how it's written in the RFP, it's sort of like might become a long running show or content series. You want to maybe
long running that kind of supports the ecosystem. Like we want something that feels cool to be a part of, that young people can aspire to be a part of, and it can create kind of a cultural capital and be like fed into youth culture. And so that's where we kind of indicated those places where youth are physically as well as socially. I think there's a level in which we often get we forget with the digital environment that there's still physical environments where young people occupy, and so music has that really great intersection of both physical and social spaces. And so thinking to that.
We've been asked this, I think, a couple of times, which is around, is this initiative a different fund that exists alongside Round Toru in January that we can apply for, or are we in the same pool as every other production company applying for money from that round? So it is a separate pot of putia dedicated to the youth initiative, but ultimately it's the same round that everything's coming into, but it is a separate ring-fenced process and has different, as you can see from the RFP, is calling for specific types of projects and content. So in all ways, it is its own fund separate too, if that makes sense. I think there's still maybe a little bit of confusion around the values. So questions come in saying, how's the information in the portal around the top 5 key values for team members used in the assessment process?
So it's so it's not going to be used in the assessment process at all. So for those teams that need an executive producer attachment, it's just a first kind of touchstone for us on what your key values are to support us to make a connection with an EP who shares the same values as you.
An easy one, which is this RFP open to proposals for projects that have previously been awarded initial development funding through NZ On Air? Absolutely, yes. And I think that's great, because there's possibly a chance that there's been projects that had what we call unsupported development or diverse development, where they might have come in without any platform support. And if those projects are strong but haven't managed to necessarily land in the way that the platforms need them to deliver to their audiences, but the creators know they're going to be able to find that audience on social media, then that's fantastic, because they'll have some, background development work already, so they'll hopefully be quite well formed. There's another question as well that's asking about budget. So if a creator who does not have experience with a larger budget but is partnered with an experienced producer and EP, will they still be considered for the scripted project? Yes, they would be. Question about how many projects are you hoping to shortlist, especially for the higher budget tier? We hadn't actually gone through in some ways, we've got to have a manageable amount that we're managing at the shortlist stage. But to be quite honest with you, we don't know what's out there, and we don't know the quality of the applications that will come into us. So it's a really difficult question to answer. But I mean, realistically, we're only going to be production funding a small amount. So you don't want to set expectations around a really high volume coming in that simply couldn't be supported. So
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there's a level to that which is also trying to minimize the amount of work that people do for projects that won't be supported as well. There's that kind of both limiting the amount that will ultimately need to be assessed, and with the two-page process, it's a relatively small amount of work if you're then not ultimately shortlisted.
Yeah. There's another question that's saying, can you speak to how industry mentoring and training initiatives for younger creators can work? I might talk about the one, Thomas, that I'd been kind of more thinking about, and you could talk a little bit about the kind of maybe the cohort idea as well. But one of the conversations that's been recurring that I've been having with a few production companies over the years, especially production companies that might also have kind of digital platforms attached to their mahi or are doing a lot of screen content creation for younger skew audiences, was this idea of the value of on-the-job training that can be provided to creators, and meaningfully so not sort of attaching an individual just to a short-term project that's getting made, but actually are there opportunities for maybe on the job 6 to 12 month placements that we could potentially consider within this scheme. And it's a conversation we're just trying to have a few more we're trying to have a few more conversations around to see if there's a shape that we can put to it, where you might almost be able to find a group of willing production houses who have good support systems in place, have really great cultures that will be looking to support and mentor young people, and where you might then be able to invite young practitioners to put their hand up to say, I'd really be interested in working there. And the idea being that if you are doing it for 6 months to 12 months, you're across the whole production life cycle of projects as well, and able to really learn and add value as you go. So that's one of the areas that we're kind of looking at, but haven't put a whole lot of shape around it just yet, but we're hoping might be able to form part of this initiative. And then there's a couple that are also sort of floating around that have a slightly different structure, don't they, Thomas?
Yeah, more the kind of cohort structure with of like supporting a group of young people to tell a story with some scaffolding and support from EPs and mentors wrapped around them.
And then there's also, I think, which people would be much more used to, is the kind of workshops that we might also be able to look to facilitate. Like, would there be some great webinars that we could do that look at 101 around budgets and 101 around marketing? And I think those are their kind of more broad reach, but there's also huge value in those types of industry workshops as well that we could look to have as part of this, especially if we can start to see through this shortlisting process a lot of the same types of questions rising to the fore, and then the opportunity to be able to give some skills and training to a much broader group, not just those that get shortlisted. There's a lot of value in there, I think. Yeah. Just looking for clarification, the RFP states that podcasts are not included in this. Does this include video podcasts that are intended for social media platforms, e.g. Mandate NZ type vidcast? It's a great question, actually, because the reason we took podcasts out was that we were conscious that it was a pretty big RFP asking for lots of different things, and that putia can kind of end up being spread quite thinly. And podcasts weren't showing up hugely in the Where Are the Audiences data that we could see. We were seeing a little bit of it there, but not massively. And so we were just trying to kind of constrain for this pilot and this initiative. We were trying to kind of get quite, put some parameters around it to a degree. But I think video podcasts and the way this has been spoken about would be eligible. And I think we could probably update the document to reflect that, because I think that is within the frame of the social media platforms and how that content is being consumed.
Yeah.
And then another question says, our team consists of experienced EPs and new creators. Would we be considered as a team for this? My answer to that would be yes.
Yeah.
And that's great, because you've got that structure in place. That's all that's come in previously supplied. So are there any other questions to throw out to that people could maybe put their hand up and we could just throw to you? Danny, is that your hand? Like an IRL hand? Yeah, go.
Do I unmute? Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
I am in the I don't know if it's a fortunate or unfortunate position of a whole bunch of groups pitching to me ideas.
Mhm.
They're a producer, director, or writer, and like it's a blessing and it's kind of cool. But I'm just wondering what's the reality of me applying for 5 different projects, and in what capacity before you guys just say you're doing too much. I'm just wondering like how many, what's the limit that we can produce or
Yeah,
direct or write?
that's a great question. I think in a funny way, I'd almost throw it back to you, and it might be a conversation we can have individually with people like yourselves who might be being attached to multiple projects, where if we can see that, we might be able to say to you, what is your kind of capacity, do you think? Because of course you want to, if you're really interested in all those different projects, but maybe one or two of those, you kind of want to be able to put your name to the things you are really interested in, and if any of them get up. But I think we would be trying to contact you to say what's actually realistic here, because that might be a way to kind of, then we would look at it our side and we could look at a prioritization. I mean, in a lot of ways, we'll be really interested to look at balance though, as well as like, are we bringing as many different voices and practitioners and EPs into the mix as we can to sort of allow this to scale and ripple out. But I think it's a fair question, and if we saw your name was attached to a lot and they were all, we'd kind of maybe come and chat to you about it and just say what's actually feasible from your perspective.
Mm.
Does that make sense? I've got another question in before anyone had another one, which is, why is NZ On Air taking on the responsibility of connecting mentors and EPs as this leans towards a studio system? Why not create these opportunities outside of a funding round instead of during? I think that's a fair question. I think we're not trying to that if we go back to like the intent of why we're doing it or the principles around it, it's certainly not to what's the word I'm looking for? It's not to try and sort of force people to do something that's not kind of in line with what the projects or their team needs. But I think we're trying to acknowledge that there are a lot of practitioners out there who are asking for that. Like that's what came through in the feedback. It's part of the reason why we've looked to create the system around it, is because when we went out and spoke to creators, they would often say it's really hard for us to know who to approach, how to approach them. They've got their own projects they're trying to put in, so we're really low on their priority list. So part of, I guess, the leverage of doing it through a funding round is that this is already happening. The money's to one side. So if producers are really interested in working with less experienced practitioners and want to give back, they're able to say, yeah, I can see that there's this great initiative happening. It doesn't compete against things I might be trying to do in the general round. And actually, I'd love to say, yes, I could, if I meet with a team and we connect and it can work, we'd be interested in it. So I think we'll learn a lot from doing this process, and by all means, we'll be really open to getting feedback from people as we go through. But it was certainly something we heard from many of the people we talked to, is this is needed, and there isn't a lot of structure around how to do this well. So it's us as NZ On Air trying to see if we can open some of those doors and create the space for more of those mentoring conversations to happen. If you're outside of the target age group, but an emerging mid-career producer who is supporting newer creators, how will this impact the application? I don't think it will. I think what we've said in the RFP is that we obviously really want to support creative storytellers who sit within this age range. But if you're outside of that 15 to 24 age range, but working with that team, that's great. That's kind of what we're hoping for.
Yeah, it's also the fact that the kaupapa of Within My Reach is for youth content, but it's also about creating that sustainable pathway. So if you're a new and emerging creative, then you need things that are within your reach too, so you kind of fit in the umbrella.
And then what kind of creative supports outside of EP attachment are you thinking of to support emerging writers looking for their first scripted opportunity? I think within this particular funding initiative, like it's not a primary aim to sort of focus on writers. I think there are other skills training and development initiatives that are out in the ecosystem supported by a lot of the wonderful guilds and kind of industry bodies. So I wouldn't say there's anything specific to this RFP that is looking to that exclusively. Yeah. And I think Nina said that, is it Jay has got your hand up?
Hello. I think I just wrote it in the chat as well, but if you're like a creative who sits outside of the age bracket, and you're not in a producerial role and you actually want to be making some stuff, are you still going to be considered, or are you prioritizing creators who do sit inside the audience bracket?
Oh, apologies. So I misinterpreted your question, because I thought what we were saying is we've clearly said in the RFP we would like to prioritise having teams that sit within that age band, but we've got no issues of wider people involved or supporting them or involved creatively sit outside it, as long as it feels. And we're not saying exclusively that you can't be older, than that age range and not get funding, but I think we're really trying to emphasise there's so few opportunities for these creators in that age band to feel like they're getting an ability to put their work forward. So we do want to emphasize that that's the priority. So I think to answer your question, you're saying you'd still want to be working with newer creators. Is that right, based on your question?
No, I'm just basically, what I'm hearing from you is that because I sit outside of the age range and I don't operate primarily by choice as a producer,
that
I would be less, like, I would pretty much not be eligible because I'm
you wouldn't not be eligible. The RFP talks about this, and it just says that we would like to prioritize those that are sitting within that age range.
So does that, just sorry to continue on, so it's like you're prioritizing them, we're not excluded, but would the application be lesser weighted? Or like, I just mean like prioritizing, you obviously want to get them forward.
I mean, I think in essence, when we're saying we'd like to prioritize, that does mean it is lesser weighted. But I think we're really clear that this isn't trying to be exclusionary. And if you've got a fantastic application and story, and if you know exactly how you think you can reach that audience, then that will absolutely be considered and assessed accordingly. It's just, I think that, I guess a good example to give is if your project sat alongside another and they were equally kind of assessed and weighted, and one was a team that sat within that 15 to 24 cohort, it might get weighted up on that basis alone if it was exactly side by side, but your one might be screeds above, and so therefore it can sail through, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Jamie, see your hand.
Hi, I was just wondering, it's in regards to your comment about involving Sparta with the matchmaking of the producers and EPs. Sparta, there's a threshold to even be a part of it, and I was wondering, are you engaging with other guilds outside of Sparta as well for this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think because we haven't put a whole lot of specifics into exactly how that process will work, absolutely, I think we need to be talking to the other guilds is the short answer. But well, I don't know how far we are down that. Thomas, you might be able to speak to that with a little bit more detail.
The EOI is open to everyone, so absolutely every producer who meets the eligibility can apply to be an EP.
But Jamie, to your point, we'll make sure the other guilds are all across that as well, so that they can be sharing that out with their membership. And that might already have been done. Sorry, Thomas, but anything else? Any other hands up? Mata.
Unmuted. I just have a question about the partnership with Contagion, and I think it's really cool, and I think it's exciting that more money is going into that part, because I don't necessarily consider my job one to know about the marketing of my work, and so I wondered about, is there a way in which they come on earlier to help with the strategy? Is that something that we should really have formed, or is that something we're kind of making up based on the research, based on our interaction, based on the context we want to see, and then hoping that it kind of aligns down the way?
So it's a great question. Says, I can see you sitting there, says Donaldson. No, you don't want to speak to it? Okay, great. Thanks. Says is our audience and media strategist. So she's the one sort of running point with Contagion. I think we've done a workshop recently, and I think we've recorded it. Says, can you give me a thumbs up if we recorded it? Yes, it was a big fan in Auckland.
On our website.
Awesome. So I'll actually link that out to everyone on this call as well, because what we were trying to do is explain how, because what we've done with Contagion is we've piloted using them only in the Tamariki kids content space, funding kids content, and that was because of the new children's strategy, which was talking about radical platform sharing. So we were no longer going through just through TVNZ, who used to be responsible for marketing the children's content. So the world we were operating in was, right, we're going to go radical platform sharing. We should have a system in place that allows us to do some marketing and promotion around this content so it's discoverable. So we've been learning a lot through that process, and then now we're looking to roll it out for youth for just the same reason. So what we're thinking at this stage, and we will provide more detail, is that we said to everybody in the RFP, put some money into your budget and think about marketing, because I think we've set aside about $300,000 separate, which is the discoverability campaigns that will be organised through Contagion. But that won't mean that every single youth-funded project will get a Contagion marketing campaign attached to it. So we'll have to do, as we will with some of our broader funding this year, we'll have to make some calls around what might get prioritised to have the additional layer of campaign support around it. And it's highly likely that some of those will prioritise some of those higher level scripted shows that we talked about. If we're putting more investment into the content, there's even more kind of responsibility and heft required to make sure they reach eyeballs. So that was why we'd said put marketing against all your projects, so that at least there's a base level of paid marketing spend that people will have sort of accounted for their projects. And then if your project's selected to be part of a kind of additional Contagion discoverability campaign, we'll try and be figuring out that as early as possible. And the way we did it with children's was that the producers were able to provide Contagion with a brief that kind of said, okay, here's who my audience is. These are the types of, this is the sort of subject matter or the areas where there might be some really interesting opportunities to do some marketing and promotion around, if you're thinking in that way and you have those ideas. And then Contagion can go back and look at what a tailored marketing campaign could look like on the basis of that. So it is absolutely supposed to be done in line with the creators and based on the content that's funded. And says, I see your hands up, so feel free to correct me.
No, you're absolutely right. And I just had some thoughts that will follow off the back of the video that you can go and view from the website from our recent workshop. And if you're creating your own marketing strategy, some of the learnings that we've had from what we've done with Tamariki is to make sure that you front weight your marketing. So make as much noise as you can at launch, because you find that as time goes by, the engagement and interest drops off. So making lots of noise and getting everyone on board at the start is really important. Another learning that we've had is that we need to have really strong call to action in everything we do. We want people to view the content. So it's not branding and here's my pretty content or here's my cool content. It's why should people click now? Because it's probably going to be marketing in a digital space. Why should people click to view your content now? And just making a really clear call to action. And I think it's just you thinking to what Thomas has said earlier, thinking about your own media behaviours and what are the kind of advertising messages that you respond to, and line them up with what you're wanting to do. So yeah, that's just a few points to start with anyway.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Cez. And we also did some, Aotearoa Screen Publicists Collective did some great work recently. It was sort of around COVID times, I want to say 2021 or 2022, but they created some wonderful resources and handbooks for creators to be thinking about, more so in the publicity space, to be fair, but there's some really fantastic, and we'll share it again. We'll make sure this is all up on the website, but letting creators know ways that they could involve publicists at early stages as well with their content. And that might be part of the thinking if you're not super au fait with paid marketing and it's not your jam, but the sort of publicity side, that might be more heavily weighted within the allocation that you're putting towards your kind of paid marketing and promotion of your project. So we'll share those resources around, and very keen to hear from creators when they're putting their applications in or calling us beforehand of what they do and don't know in the marketing space, because then we can do a good job of trying to share information or provide guidance or kind of help that process along, because I think, again, it's another one where we're learning as we do it. So the more we can get feedback on it, or it would be really helpful. There was another question that's just come in that was really interesting. It says the RFP mentions aspirational content for young people. Oftentimes young people's realities are not aspirational and can feel alienated by content that doesn't reflect that, i.e. skins. Does NZ On Air have any flexibility around the aspirational element? Thomas, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Can you repeat that question?
It was around us sort of emphasizing aspirational content. And of course, it's quite a subjective term. And I guess the comment was saying that actually for a lot of young people, they might feel alienated if it's too aspirational. So is there flexibility around the consideration of that term? Which
absolutely.
I think,
absolutely. I think what we're saying when we're saying aspirational, I think there's the research really points to the fact that there's like cultural cringe around our own local content, and so we want the content to feel relatable and feel connected, and also feel like young people want to be a part of it rather than go, oh, this was made here. We want them to feel proud it was made here, and that can be grounded in reality as much as that aspiration aspect.
And maybe a good example of that, because anecdotally we've had some great feedback from younger viewers around shows like Rurangi, and how that speaks to them and things. And I guess that the argument there is that fits within that kind of moniker of aspirational. And it's just, and as you say, it's how you're seeing yourself reflected back at you and connecting into that content as a result. There's another question that says 2 pages is quite short. How do you want us to prioritize space? Which is really fair. I.e., would you rather hear more about the project pitch and creative synopsis or more about marketing and budget breakdown? It's absolutely the former. I think the marketing and the budget breakdown, that is the kind of level of detail that can come at the final application stage. So it's absolutely squarely about the story you want to tell, why you want to tell it, who you want to tell it to. And as we have been saying, I think it's still really critical to be able to say whether it's within your reach. Would you add anything to that?
So with how we've set up the portal, you only need to put your budget figure. You don't need to supply us with a full budget. You just need to give us a budget figure that we'll then assess based on the amount of content that you're wanting to produce. So you're not expected to supply a full budget. So that doesn't take up your 2-page space. Neither does talking to the experience you have today and kind of what's coming forward. That's asked in the portal, as well as your values. So what your 2-page pitch should cover is that synopsis, and then like Amie said, why you want to tell the story, your relationship to it, and also that audience stuff. So if you think even broader, you could be like, page 1 is my creative material, page 2 is the why and the audience, or you could do more creative and less audience. It's totally up to you.
There's also a question that says, and this might be one for you, Thomas, within the example budget provided for the marketing section, there's no budget for actual social media spend. Will that be included within the 50K cap?
Yeah, so absolutely, that can be included in the 50K cap. So that was an example of certain costs that you might have in certain line items you might put things against. And so paid promotion of your own social media would definitely be there. And we should add that, Nina. Add that to the template.
And this is a great question. I think there's probably some thought that we all need to go back and as a team and just have a think about what this means and how we kind of put some guidance forward. It says, is there a safety process / guide around the content creation in relation to the stories shared of and by our rangatahi? And I think the short answer is absolutely yes. And what would normally happen in the course of events of funding coming into us is that's an expectation that the team provides that level of detail and information in their applications, depending on, what access they have to communities and the stories that they're trying to tell. I think given that we might be working with younger creators in this space, and that there might be some guidance required to know how to do this, we'd be really open to maybe, we'll have a think about it our side on our team, and Thomas, maybe we can kind of go away and have a think about that, and there's some thoughts we can put out in the mix to sort of say, here's ways you could approach that. Ultimately, it has to be determined by the team in terms of how they will do it. We're not responsible for that, but we could certainly help provide some some guidance and some thought about what you might need to think about. And Jay, I think you have your hand. Yeah, you have your hand up.
Yes, I had my hand up again. I just wanted to circle back again. I know I'm being a little pushy, but whatever. In regards to supporting creatives from a story perspective, obviously you are wanting to target, like, obviously 14 to 24-year-olds creators to tell their
15.
own stories.
Yes,
15 to 24, sorry. And just in regards to that, there isn't a lot of support in terms of, like, basically what I'm saying is that a lot of that audience is watching international content, which is developed overseas. So I'm like, our content has to compete with that, because they've got like the Netflixes and all the international stuff that's on TVNZ. You've got Disney, you've got Neon, you've got everything out there. And obviously overseas, they have huge budgets and they have a lot more time to get really experienced writers and storytellers involved. So that's where that question was coming from, in terms of like wanting to support from that like story level, because in the research document by TRA, two of the core elements that they spoke to in terms of quality were story elements, which is creative storylines and well-developed characters. The third one was obviously technical elements, which obviously you guys want to support that, but there is this other side that speaks to the writing side of it. So that's kind of where that question was coming from.
Yeah,
in terms of like, there are other,
I might be misunderstanding where you're coming at this, because I think if what you're saying is there's a level of sort of skill required, I think we're acknowledging that our side as well, and wanting to see teams come together who might have young writers and young creators who don't have any kind of credits or experiences, supported with those that do, coming together on projects to make that happen. Because I think one thing we absolutely don't want to do is set creators up to fail. And if we've got younger and emerging creators and storytellers wanting to pitch for one of those higher level, higher scale scripted projects that don't have the the scaffolding around them to deliver to that's not at all what the intention of the scheme is.
So in that
maybe
regard,
you and I can take this. I'm just conscious of everyone's time. I'm very happy to keep chatting to you about it as well. No, not at all. It's really helpful, but just conscious everybody's we've hit 2. But thank you all so much. Those questions were brilliant. And I think what we will do is, there's enough there that we should definitely pull together an FAQ document, frequently asked questions document, and share that around and come back on some of those ones that require a bit more detail. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.